Thank you everyone for attending. This is part 5 of the leadership series. I'm Brad Konik, CEO of Konik Technical Talent Network. We're based out of Northeast Minneapolis, and coincidentally, we are and will be this afternoon celebrating our company's 49th anniversary. So yeah, we'll be quickly planning and starting the planning for our 50th next year. So we're excited about that. Just a little insight into the market, particularly the technical recruiting labor market. We have seen over the last 30 to 45 days, things picking back up a bit. It was pretty quiet in the first quarter, and then it stabilized in the second, but we have started to see a significant uptick in the number of open positions coming in. We're not hearing of a lot of companies that have been doing any sort of layoffs. Many are kind of holding their own, not necessarily doing a bunch of hiring, but holding their own. And then, like I said, in the last 30 to 45 days, we're starting to see more signs and more evidence that companies are getting back onto the growth train, as you say, and contacting us for technical recruiting. So one of the things I'll throw out there, I'll give you a little bit of spiel on us. I mean, we specialize in recruiting for engineering, manufacturing, and AEC, which includes architecture and construction. Our recruiting team has over 100 years of experience. And so as the needs were to arise, you take our network that we've been building for those 49 years and you plug all that experience, recruiting experience into it, and you've essentially kind of supercharged your recruiting efforts. So one of the things that we're offering right now for the people that are involved in the leadership series is, if you do open up a qualified search between now and the end of the week, we'll get you a fun Konik camp chair to throw around the fire pit or to set out at a soccer game. And we'll also enter you into a drawing for a $500 Dick's Sporting Goods gift card. So both things just in time for summer, fishing, camping, whatever your fun festivity is, these are 2 good items. So again, if you've got a technical position, engineers, technicians, in the engineering, manufacturing, architecture, construction industries, reach out to us. We'd love to help you out. So we can place candidates on a contract to direct, or direct basis. So if you're interested in learning more, Tom, my business partner, will post a link to our website on in the chat area. As far as our company goes, our core purpose is to positively impact people's lives. That's part of why we put this leadership series together and offered it up to our network at no charge. We thought it was a great way to offer up some consultative and inspiring messaging around leadership. So hopefully you enjoy the content today. As Adam had mentioned earlier, if you weren't logged on yet, you can post your questions into the chat box, and I'll be keeping an eye out for those throughout the presentation. When appropriate, I'll throw my camera back on. Adam, that'll be your cue for a live question during the presentation. And if not, otherwise, what I'll do is I'll queue them up, and we'll address them all in the Q&A right after the following, immediately following the presentation. So please stick around if you're able to. So with that, I'll introduce our presenter. For those of you that have been part of the series in the past, you're very familiar with Adam now at this point. He is the co-founder of Renzo Experience, leadership development and culture consulting firm based in the Midwest. He's worked with thousands of leaders to help create clarity and alignment within their organizations. So as I mentioned before, he's a 2-time TED-Talk speaker. One of your talks impressively surpassing 6 million views on YouTube. So excited to have you back, Adam. Super excited about today's message. Crafting your next 3 years, the leader's secret weapon to team longevity. So again, thanks all for attending, and hopefully Konik positively impacts your life today. So with that, Adam, I'll pass it over to you. I'll turn the camera off, and like I said, when I pop back on, it's because I got something to say.
Right on. Thank you, Brad.
Perfect.
And I want to highlight one of the announcements Brad just made. 49 years is an unbelievable accomplishment in any business. I think they say there's 1 million small businesses started every year, and 80% of them will be out of business within year one. 80% of the remaining 20% are done by year 5. And I think it's like 1% ever make the 10-year mark. So to make 49 years in business, there is something to be said about that, Brad, about Konik Network in general. So kudos to you and the team.
Oh, thank you.
That is amazing. That's
Thank
amazing.
you very much. Yeah, we're very, very proud of it to carry on the legacy for sure.
So
thank
cool.
you.
So cool. Well, today's content, y'all, is all about crafting your next 3 years. It's the secret weapon, what we call the secret weapon for employee longevity. And I'm going to go into really what we're going to talk about today is a strategy or a methodology, an experiment, if you will, with your team, but that will allow you to help them craft what their next 3 years looks like. And you can have it as a rolling 3-year vision. And the power of this is that it's very, very simple, but it's very profound when people take it seriously. And so for those of you that are on with us now, or those that are listening to the recording, know this, you will gain access to all of the slide decks. We have a simple sheet that literally goes through how do you craft the 3-year vision, or crafting the 3-year, we call it the 3-year letter. So that will all be downloadable on the site. Obviously, this is session 5 of the Konik Leadership Webinar Series that Brad and I are putting on. And if you are new to this, know that you can go back and you can watch the previous 4 sessions. All of them somewhat build upon each other. And in fact, today's session, next month's session will build upon today's session. So if you like today, make sure you get next month's session on your calendar as well. And you can do that down below at koniknetwork.com/leadership series. So with that, let me dive in, all about crafting your next 3 years. First and foremost, I'm going to make this bold statement that we tend to overestimate what can be done in 1 year, and we underestimate what can be done in 3. And so to add a little context to this statement, I want you to think about, where were you 3 years ago today? Keep in mind, it would have been June 21st, 2020. And if you don't mind, throw in the chat, maybe a response, a word or two. Where were you June 21st, 2020? I'm really curious. Keeping in mind, we tend to overestimate what can be done in 1 year, underestimate what can be done in 3. Carrie said quarantining. This is good. Any other responses out there? What were you doing June 21st, 2020? The joke answer is always buying toilet paper. I think that's what most people were doing. Working from home, figuring out what was next with our business. That's an important one, Chad. So love this. We were doing things differently then than we're doing today. And in fact, what I have pointed out to a number of companies in the past 2 years at least, is that in the midst of that chaos, business changed almost overnight. And the business changed, but the vision for the business didn't necessarily change. We just had to change how we went about achieving that vision. And one of those may have been that everyone was going to go work from home. So the reality is that if the vision was really concrete and your leaders kept going back to the vision over and over and over again, then it would have been put upon the rest of the team to get really creative about, well, how do we then achieve that? Knowing that we tend to overestimate what can be done in 1 year, people were looking at 2020 saying, well, what do we do now? How can we hit the goals that we've set for ourselves? But if there was a 2023 goal that we were looking at, it would change a little bit, but not that much. And so we're going to use this strategy to help our teams figure out, what does 3 years out look like, not only for the business, for the department, for each one as an individual. And I'm going to share with you throughout today's session why this is the secret weapon. So I'll share that here in a minute. When we talk about underestimating what can happen in 3 years, I often ask the question when we do this exercise with groups, who has had really profound life changes in the last 3 years? And so far, the pinnacle answer was, I had a young guy in his early 30s. I think he was 31 or 32. He said, I don't think anybody can beat my story. And I said, well, please share. He said, 3 years ago, I was living with a bunch of dudes in a house. I was in a dead-end job. I didn't have a girlfriend. And fast forward 3 years, I got married to my dream girl. I'm living in a home, not our dream home yet, but one that we're looking to move into, but living in a home with his dream girl. And get this, they had 3 children. So they got busy in 3 years, so to speak. Now, I think there was a set of twins. That helps, move the process along. But going from dead-end job, living with roommates in a house you rent, to getting married, living in your dream home, having 3 kids, that's a massive shift in 3 years' time. And this is nothing compared to what some people will go through throughout their life. So I want you to keep in mind the context of overestimating what can be done this year, but underestimating what June 21st, 2026 might look like. And so using that logic, I want to share with you some of the content from where this came. I was given a book called Think and Grow Rich, which was written by a guy named Napoleon Hill. I was given this book as a high school graduation present. So I was 18. Someone handed me this book and said, read this, it will change your life. Well, I read it in my teenage years. I was 18 or 19 in college, read it, didn't quite get it. And someone said, oh, that's normal. Read it again in your 20s, you'll get it. Well, I read it twice in my 20s, still didn't get it entirely. And someone said, read it again in your 30s and you'll get it. So I read it again in my 30s, starting to get the message, but didn't quite understand fully what the book was about. And then finally in my 40s, early 40s, I reread the book, and I actually read this copy, which is kind of like what you see, but it's an embossed leather copy I got at a Barnes & Noble. And you'll notice that the key words in this book were capitalized. So key words, key phrases were capitalized. As I was reading the book, I was like, oh, now I get it. And I'll give you the history of this book quick if you've not read the book. Think and Grow Rich was written in 1937 by Napoleon Hill. And Napoleon Hill was a reporter for a newspaper at the time, but he had been commissioned by a guy named Andrew Carnegie, to write a book about all the most successful people in industry at the time. And so Napoleon Hill was tasked with going out and interviewing the most successful titans of the time and figuring out what was it that made them click. Why were they successful when other people were struggling? And so it was a 2-year process of reporting and researching and writing and rewriting until they published the book Think and Grow Rich in 1937. Now, this is one of the most seminal books of personal development and self-help that's ever been written. It's sold millions and millions of copies through the years. But what Napoleon Hill found out was that the most successful people throughout the 20s and 30s had one thing in common, and it was this. The one common element among all successful people studied was they all had definiteness of purpose, meaning they all knew exactly what they were setting out to do every single day, throughout the year, over the years. They had short-term vision, long-term vision. They set goals for themselves, but they knew exactly what they were there to do. They had definiteness of purpose. And so this was the takeaway. One of the core messages in the book was desire is the starting point of all achievement. And I'll say it again, desire is the starting point of all achievement. Without a burning desire, people won't begin to achieve what they want to achieve. And the larger the desire, the larger their ability to go after that thing that they say they want. And he equated it to a flame. Small flame, not a lot of heat. Big flame, lots of heat. Same with desire. So Napoleon Hill wrote this book, published it in 1937. It's been reprinted hundreds, probably thousands of times at this point. And it was 1937, keep in mind when he wrote it. In 1938, he started on his next project and he finished it in record time. That book was called Outwitting the Devil. And in 1938, when Napoleon Hill wrote this book, he handed the manuscript to his wife, who was prone to read all of his works. And she said, Napoleon, I forbid you from publishing this book. There's no way you can publish this. In fact, I forbid it. I'm putting my foot down. I forbid you from getting this published. And Napoleon said, this is the most important work I've ever done. Why would you say that? And she said, we will be ostracized from our family and friends. We'll be excommunicated from the church. We'll get kicked out of every club that we're a part of. No one will be able to look at us the same way if you publish this book. And so the book went into the archives at the Napoleon Hill Foundation. And there it sat. All the while, his wife was the executive director of the foundation. She passed on, and her nephew took over as the executive director of the foundation. He knew his aunt's wishes, and the book, the manuscript, stayed in the archives at the Napoleon Hill Foundation. And it stayed there again for decades. And then this gentleman, Napoleon Hill's wife's nephew, stepped down from the position, and someone else took over. And as they were going back through all of the archives, all of the material that Napoleon Hill had crafted, they read this manuscript and said, this is more prevalent today than it was in the 1930s, even though in the book, he's talking about Mussolini and dictators and things like that. So this book, the backstory is, it was written in 1938. It went into the archives. It was not published until 2011. And in 2011, this book was released, the first time it had ever been seen by anyone outside of the Napoleon Hill Foundation and the publishers. But this book was, again, an instant bestseller and widely regarded as one of the greatest self-help books that had ever been published. Well, in the book, Napoleon Hill basically stated this: in life, there are drifters and there are non-drifters. One group can be easily blown off course. That would be the drifters. The others will succeed no matter what they encounter. They are non-drifters. And this is a high-level idea of what the book was about. The reason that his wife said, you can't publish this or we will be excommunicated, was the book itself was a conversation back and forth between Napoleon Hill and the devil. And if you really want to be entertained, I encourage you to go download the audiobook of Outwitting the Devil, because whomever they chose to be the voice talent for the devil, they nailed spot on. It is so well done. And it is very, very intriguing to hear Napoleon Hill ask a question and the devil respond. And essentially, the questions he was asking were things like, why is it that some people achieve great things while other people are stuck in mediocrity? He would ask things like, why is it that some people can create massive wealth while others struggle financially? He would talk about mental health. Why is it that some people are very, very mentally healthy while some struggle with depression and anxiety? And essentially, the devil came back and answered and said, we as a human species put ourselves in our own version of hell, and we keep ourselves there. And so he talks about, how do you outwit the devil? And one of the core messages is by becoming a non-drifter, by identifying exactly what it is you want in your life and moving ever closer to that thing over and over and over again. And I'm circling the wagons here of how we get to the 3-year letter and how to craft your 3-year vision. But I want to shape the context of why this is really so powerful. 2 other books that I'll share with you really quick, and these should go on your reading list immediately if they're not on there. Dr. Benjamin Hardy, this is a more recent publish. I think he published this book in 2021 or 2022. The book is called Be Your Future Self Now. And Dr. Hardy in the book describes the difference between the human species and other species. One of the main differences being that humans have the ability for prospection. Prospection is this idea that we can view what our future self looks like and then begin making decisions today that support that future vision of ourselves. And so in the book, he stated this: in order to maximize our time and efforts to maximum benefit, we must stop working for and looking at who we are now and instead focus on who we want to be in the future. The idea being use prospection. And here's why this is really critical for you as a leader. I've done this exercise that I'm about to introduce to you with dozens and dozens and dozens of groups. And it's everything from senior leaders to young professionals to leadership. I do a lot of leadership development academies where I'll come in multiple times over the year. And one particular group that I was speaking to, their leaders were in the room, and the direct reports that were going through the Leadership Academy were there as well. And I had the direct reports do this exercise that I'm about to share with you. And when they did, I said, what is the hardest part of this? And they said, we don't know what our career will look like in 2 years or 3 years. We don't know maybe where the business is headed in the next 3 years or 5 years. And so I said, when you identify, if you're asked the question, how do you see yourself in the business or in your career 3 years from now? A lot of them they're left shrugging their shoulders. I don't know. I don't know what I'm waiting for my boss to tell me, was what the answer many of them gave. And then I went to their leaders who were in a different room and I said, this is what we're hearing in the other room from your direct reports. And a couple of them chimed in and said, this is interesting because we are waiting for them to tell us where they want to go in their career. And they are waiting for us to tell them where they can go in their career. And what's happening is there's this impasse between the two that causes some people, and I'm guessing in your company as well, to wonder, what is their career path like? Is it up to them to create, or is it up to their leader to tell them where they're going? This is where the exercise I'll share with you here in a minute creates massive clarity for you as the leader and for them as the direct report, or for you as the leader and leading up the chain, if you will. So let's talk about this, but let's talk about why we do it the way we do it. The exercise I'm going to introduce is all about handwriting a letter. And when we handwrite the letter, something magical happens. There's been scientific evidence to prove that typing ideas or goals, dreams, visions, versus handwriting them, something is activated in your brain when you handwrite the goal or the vision, in this case, a letter to yourself. When you handwrite it, you're actually triggering something in your mind that's creating that reality, whether it's in your imagination or your subconscious or just in the ether, right, for the universe to respond. So there is a fourth book that I'll recommend, and then I promise I'm out of books. But this book is one that I reread every year, particularly when I'm on vacation. The book is called A Happy Pocket Full of Money, Infinite Wealth and Abundance in the Here and Now. And it sounds very woo-woo, I'm sure. And candidly, it probably is as you read it. It was written by a guy named David Cameron Gikondi, who is from Kenya. And David Cameron Gikondi is a quantum physicist. So the book is less about money and it's more about how quantum physics can actually help us create the life that we desire. And in the book, Gikondi says that every single one of us should have a minimum of 500 goals that we would like to accomplish in our lifetime. This is like a master list of goals that you begin creating and you're writing down every time something strikes you. I'd like to do this. I'd like to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, or I'd like to parasail. I'd like to go skydiving. Maybe I want to run a marathon or an ultra marathon. Whatever your goals are, writing those down in a book, according to Gikondi, actually creates that reality in a different dimension. And the goal then is to begin living your life according to those goals to bring that dimension closer to the one in which you live. So Gikondi says you're constantly creating another dimension where what you truly desire exists. The goal is to bring that dimension closer to the one you're living in currently. Now, here's what I'll tell you. I hear from a lot of people, they have goals, but the goals have a someday attached to them. Someday I'd like to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. Someday I'd love to run an ultra marathon. Someday I'll be a multimillionaire, or someday I'll pay off my home. These are the goals that when we use someday, the reality is for many, many people out there, someday is too easily pushed off into the future. And so what I often do in creating this 3-year letter is begin to challenge people. What is it that if you put your mind to achieving in the next 3 years, you could do it beyond the shadow of a doubt? In effect, what we do is we ask, in terms of your belief level in this happening, score it between a level 1 and a level 10. And if it's a level 10 belief, 9 belief, 8 belief, that's good. That is a high enough belief level in that goal that you will likely achieve it in the next 3 years. If your goals, the belief level on your goals are 7 or below, the question that we then ask is, what would it require to ratchet your belief level from 7 or 8 all the way up to 9 or 10? Or if it's 1 or 2, 1 to 7, we want to get it up to an 8, 9, or a 10. So 4 books have led me to create this exercise. And I by no means am the original purveyor of this. This has been used in a variety of different environments, but we've sort of tweaked and honed the questions and the setup and the status in terms of doing this exercise. So to tee this up, there's something that we call the 3-year letter. And the 3-year letter is done in this format. And I'm going to give you kind of how it's done. I'm going to set up the process and I'm going to set up the content. And what I'm encouraging you all as leaders to do, number one, is write this letter yourself. It will become very, very clear to you that either you know beyond the shadow of a doubt what you want to accomplish in 3 years, or it will become very clear that that vision is actually pretty cloudy. And if you don't know, your boss probably doesn't know, your spouse may not know, your kids definitely don't know. And this may be critical, your higher power may not know, whether that's God or the universe or whatever you believe in. For me, sometimes creating the letter just states to the ether, again, this is what I'm after. And as I see things come to me that validate that, I know that I'm working closer and closer to that reality, which I've created for myself. Again, not trying to get super woo-woo, but this works. So we're going to write a letter, a 3-year letter, from a personal or business standpoint, or both. And I recommend both because your business and your personal lives are, intimately tied together. Secondly, the letter that you're writing for yourself will become a North Star document for your life. Remember early on, I talked about drifters and non-drifters in the book, Outwitting the Devil. If someone is a drifter and they don't have a North Star document about what they're going to create, then they can be easily blown off course by the next best thing. And the easiest example of next best thing could even be just doom scrolling on Instagram. I mean, if someone's doom scrolling just to kill time even, what they're doing is effectively being blown off course from what they truly want to be doing. Because if you said, hey, one of my goals is I'd like to learn piano I want to be proficient in piano within 3 years, know 7 songs by heart, be able to sing them at parties, et cetera. Well, then maybe what you're doing instead of doom scrolling because of your North Star document is you're pulling up YouTube videos about how to learn piano quickly. Or maybe you're studying chord progressions and scales and things like that in your spare time, knowing that that is one of the visions you have for yourself in the next 3 years. So this North Star document is what you'll use to determine if something is a yes or a no in your life. Essentially, you're using the letter to make decisions that support future you, according to Dr. Benjamin Hardy, right? We're not making decisions based on what feels good today, but what we want to accomplish in the next 1 to 3 years' time. This is a really critical piece of this. And it's probably worth writing down. I love quotables, tweetable statements. But one of the statements that I've been told over and over again by a really good friend of mine who's a brilliant consultant, he said that your life is perfectly engineered for the results you're currently getting. And it's worth repeating. Your life is perfectly engineered for the results you're currently getting. And you could add anything in your life, your money, your family, your marriage, your leadership skills, your relationship with your team, whatever you want to put in there. All of our results right now are perfectly engineered based on the decisions we've made up to this point. And now if we want to change our results, then we have to change some of the decisions we're making to reflect the future vision of ourselves. If the decision that you are faced with doesn't support the future vision of you, then it's an easy no, right? So this is the power of the 3-year letter. And I'm going to tie this back one more time really quick. And I will repeat the quote, Chad. Your life is perfectly engineered for the results you're currently getting. And by the way, for an engineering firm, I mean, oh my gosh, I can imagine this as a t-shirt. Our business is perfectly engineered for the results we're currently getting. Just as an aside, maybe it's a magnet we slap on the refrigerator in the kitchen. Anyway, your life is perfectly engineered for the results you're currently getting. And this is why this is really important for you all as leaders to understand. The folks that you are leading right now, no matter the age, but let's say the majority of them are either millennials or Gen Xers. And if they are millennials, right, we're kind of nearing the end of the millennial generation and the beginning of Gen Z entering the workforce. Gen Zers are somewhere between 23 and 26. They have completely different motivations than millennials do. But if you were to ask a millennial, what is considered long-term, right? When a millennial starts in a job, they're making a decision, am I going to stay here long-term? And I'm going to throw this to the chat. What do you believe the answer is? If a millennial says long-term, how long is long-term? I'd love to get your answers here. Samantha says 10 to 20 years. Good guess. 2 to 4, 3 years, says Sam. 6, 3, 5, 3 years, 5 years, 10 plus years. This is really fascinating. There is a, Chad said 1 to 3, Deanna said 1 to 2. Brad said 5. So there's a good friend of mine who's a speaker and a researcher down in Dallas, Texas. He's researched millennials for about the past decade and a half. And he will say, based on thousands and thousands of survey respondents, that the average length of tenure considered long-term by a millennial is 2 years' time. So imagine someone is with you for a year, maybe a year and a half. They don't really have a clear vision of where their career is going. They're not really sure what your vision for them is. And furthermore, they may not have a real clear vision of their own life, much beyond 2 years. So they don't know what would it look like to own a larger home, have my car paid off, have student loans paid down, et cetera, et cetera. And if we're not creating that or helping them create that, then we also cannot lead them to achieve that in their day-to-day work life. So let's talk about how we do this, because losing one of those folks, they say that it'll cost anywhere from 1 to 2 times the annual salary to replace someone. So if one of your junior engineers is making $50,000 or $60,000 a year, call it 70 or 80,000, it could cost anywhere from 80 to 150 to replace that position. Whereas if they're really talented and you see great promise in them, why not help them craft a vision for the next several years that keeps them in the seat and develops them as a leader, develops them in the company to eventually potentially take over? So this is the 3-year letter exercise. The way I recommend doing these are doing it as either a company meeting or in a one-on-one, or saying to someone, hey, we were introduced to this concept. I'd like everyone to take 10 minutes, 12 minutes, 15, whatever your number is. We're going to write this 3-year letter. And I'll give you the prompts. I'll give you some of the questions that we're going to answer. But ultimately, this is how we do this. I want you to describe in real time and present tense 3 years from today. And you're going to write it in present tense. As an example, it might say, Dear Adam, I am so happy and grateful that over the past 3 years, you have accomplished the following. And then we just literally go through and nail these one by one. What you've accomplished over the past 3 years is the central theme of the letter. You can write the letter to yourself. As I mentioned, Dear Adam, could be to my spouse, Dear Jen, my kids, Piper, Nolan, and Davis, or someone that you would hold yourself accountable to. So it could be to a senior leader. It could be to your business partner. It could be to a relative or a mentor of yours that you hold dear. The reason we want to write it to someone specific is another thing happens when we do that. If you find yourself being accountable to yourself, write the letter to you. If you find yourself being very accountable to your spouse, write it to your spouse. In my mind, in my world, I would like to think that I am most accountable to my children because I want them to see me in a certain light. So I write my letter often to my kids because I want them to know that when I set my mind to something, I'm going to achieve it. We write the letter to someone and include where you're writing the letter from. So we tend to do these as a family, kind of a fun family activity on December, somewhere between the 29th and the 31st. We're all locked in over the holidays and we sit down with the letter and we say, okay, everyone's going to write a 3-year letter. What is incredibly fascinating is what 13-year-olds think they're going to be like at 16. What 16-year-olds think they're going to be like at 19 and 19-year-olds think they're going to be like at 22. It's really fascinating. So we write them, and then the next year we read that 3-year letter from years past. And what's really interesting is most of the letters my kids write or we've written, My wife and I, we have accomplished the things we've set out to, and the ones that we didn't accomplish may not have been that high on our priority list in the first place. So we're going to include the place you're writing it from. I often will put the Starbucks near my house because I love to go there and hang out and read and write. It's just a normal place for me. Some of you may want to write it from the beach or your lake home or some vacation spot in Italy. Wherever you choose to write it from is your call, 100%. This is the 3-year letter process. And the reason that I said 10, 12, 15 minutes is you don't really want to give your teammates a long, long time to write it because they'll get mired down in the details. They'll second guess themselves. Well, do I really want to do this? Is this it? I'm not sure what these numbers are. They'll start to question everything. But when we put a compressed time frame to it, they'll just write free thought. So I encourage you to do the same. I want you to set a timer for 10, 12, 15 minutes. I'm going to give you a little bit of time today. We'll buy back some time at the end of the session. But I want you to actually sit down and write yourself a letter of what do the next 3 years look like. And I'll tell you that when I share my letter with my wife, one of the things that happens is we get very clear together about how we're both going to accomplish what we set out to accomplish. And when two people or a family are working together, there's so much more that they can accomplish. The same is true within the walls of your company. If you know that certain people have certain goals and you're helping them achieve those, I'll share with you a graphic here in a moment of why that is so profoundly important as a leader for the people that you're leading to feel that much more supported. Okay, here's the content. These are sort of the themes to consider. What you've accomplished in the last 3 years. And these could be things like time, money, relationships, service, any benefits that you've received. So this could be additional pay. It could be time off, vacations you've taken. It could be accolades or certifications that you've gotten. Again, it could be that maybe you learned those 7 songs on the piano. You can now play at a party. Whatever those kind of benefits that you've received, write those down. Obstacles or habits that you've removed. Maybe you've decided to cut out sugar or sugary drinks in your diet. Maybe you decided that a habit you were going to enlist was drinking more water every single day. Maybe it's exercise. Maybe it's some of the bad habits that you might have. It's funny, one group, 3 or 4 of them said online shopping. Not a negative habit I have, but some people have it. Okay, so whatever yours might be, how do we cut some of that out? What is your impact on others, both personal and or business? And then last but not least, what growth areas have you experienced? Spiritual, physical, financial, mental, emotional. How are you growing and developing? And why this is a really important bullet point in the themes to consider is the millennial generation and Gen Z, one of their core values, their core orientations, and why they're looking for particular jobs with particular companies is it's not money. Money is like the 4th or 5th thing on their motivation list. They either want to do work that's purposeful, they want to be supported in their growth, or they want to be on a path of mastery, meaning they want to get so good at the thing they're studying that they become the best at what they do. And if we know this, what are the growth areas someone's really looking to enhance? And let's take any number of the people that you have on your team. If someone says, where I'm really trying to grow is in my physical health or my emotional stability, my ability, my emotional well-being, then as a leader, one of the things that you can remind them of is, hey, you mentioned physical health. Are you exercising on a regular basis? Or when they cut out at the end of the day, a half hour early with their running shoes on, you celebrate the fact that they're achieving that physical goal they've set for themselves. For the emotional well-being, it might be where you pull someone aside and say, we have a huge project coming up, and I know you're going to be asked a lot on that project. Go take an hour for yourself. In fact, here's a gift card for a massage, a manicure, a movie, whatever it is. Go take care of yourself, right? These are the kinds of things that as leaders, when we know what their goals are, we can actually engage them at a different level. We can build trust and respect and rapport, which makes all of the other things we've talked about in the sessions easier. Difficult conversations, planning their career, calling them to the carpet or giving them feedback that's constructive. All of these become easier when we do these kinds of activities. Last but not least, assessment of your life progress in this letter. I'm really thrilled that X, Y, and Z have happened in my life already. And I'm looking forward to the next 10 years when retirement's a possibility, right? I'm riffing on the content, but this is how it works. 10, 12, 15 minutes, you're just going to write free form, flowing of thoughts on the paper, and making sure that we're writing this down and then sharing it with others. And this is probably critical to share. When I do this exercise in a room, I'll often pair people up and say, if you're so inclined and comfortable sharing, share it with a partner and just read your letter aloud to them of all the things that you've accomplished. And an amazing thing happens. There is always at least 2 or 3 groups where people are crying. And the reason they're crying is they're thinking about how old their kids are going to be in 3 years, right? I mean, a tear gets brought to my eye when I think about the fact 3 years from now, I'll be an empty nester and my kids will all be out of the house and doing their own thing. I think about, for a lot of people, it might mean that your kids are newborns and they'll be going to school. And maybe that's a big deal, right? Whatever it is for you, know that it can be a very emotional thing. And so a question often comes up, how do you get people to share that wouldn't normally share this? And the easiest answer is pair them with someone they work with, and there'll be a much, much tighter bond between those people because they've shared sort of these deeper, higher level goals that they have for themselves. Hopefully that makes sense. This is the content of the 3-year letter. And so if you have the ability, you might want to grab a screen grab of the content, but know that you'll also be able to get a downloadable copy of all the slides at the end of this. And if you want to walk people through this content, you certainly can. Okay, so this is 3-year letter content. Now let me share with you why this is really critical. And then we're almost to the point we're going to open it up for Q&A and talk about this a little bit more in depth. I mentioned in earlier sessions, the 3 fundamental responsibilities of leaders are: number 1, they craft a vision. Number 2, they build alignment. And number 3 is they champion execution. So craft a vision, build alignment, champion execution. And when we talk about crafting a vision, in one of the previous webinars, we talked about clarity, alignment, and purpose. And clarity, alignment, and purpose are somewhat reflected in these 3, but clarity is the bus is going to San Diego. And when we get to San Diego, there's tons of fun and in the sun, great beaches, great food, great live music. But make no mistake, this is where we're going, San Diego. Building alignment is, does everyone on the bus know that we're going to San Diego? And are we all in agreement that when we get there, we're going to have a ton of fun and this person's going to do this and this person's going to do that? That's alignment. Champion execution happens when we start to define who is going to do what along the way. And the 3-year letter fits in really nicely here because some of your teammates are going to write, I'd really love this certification. I'd love to be working on these kinds of projects. I'd like to really expand my project management skills or my knowledge of this particular software. And when you know that as a leader, you can begin steering these folks to the execution items that need to be executed that are in full support of their vision. Hopefully that makes sense. Too often what happens is you're going to have team members that are sitting back, arms folded across their chest going, why wasn't I on that project? How come I didn't get that certification? Why was I never asked to go to this conference or attend this class? You know, don't they know that this is where I want to go? And you as a leader are probably like, I didn't, because you never told me. So the 3-year letter is helpful in that regard as well, that we can now become very, very clear with our team. I didn't know this is what you wanted, but now that I do, let me help you get there by putting you on the right projects and certifications and so on. So 3 fundamental responsibilities of leaders are really important. I shared this slide earlier and it's worth repeating. There's a big difference between management and leadership, though both get results. When we look at this, management is about behaviors and activities. So we tell people that we're managing, I need you to show up on time. I need you to not interrupt in meetings. Hey, I kind of need your attitude to be a little bit better on this project because you're a bit of a Debbie or Davy Downer on this, right? So we're managing when we're talking about behaviors and activities. Still get results, right? But if we're talking leadership, And by the way, if we're dealing with behaviors and activities, we have someone's hands. Their hands are doing the work, right? We can get results by engaging someone's head in the project. But when we start down the path of leadership and we talk to people about outcomes and impact, what we are now doing is we're engaging people at the heart level. And the heart level happens for leaders when that person knows that the leader has their back. And I'll give you a case in point. We have a very tight-knit team at Renzo and at one of my other companies called the Shred Method. Our teams are very, very tight. And when I say that, what I mean is we do our 3-year letters together and we share them as a group. We share our core values with one another. And we know that, I know that as an example, if I say I'm going to show up to a meeting on time and I'm not there, I'm insulting the value of one of my team members whose value is integrity. And I have to make sure that if I'm going to be late, I'm letting him know in advance. And I know that I respect him about it, but I also know that I have his heart because I'm fully in support of whatever he decides his goals are, whether it's in the company or outside the company. He knows that I have his back. And it wouldn't be that way if we didn't share that kind of information together. So this becomes really important to use because we're engaging them at the heart level all the time. Hey, I know you're going on that trip. Hopefully this supports your dream of spending 2 weeks in a car with your children, right? If we're supporting that, we're engaging people at the heart level. So with that, I'm gonna turn this back over to Brad here in a moment. So Brad, if you'll come back on with me. But what I want to do as Brad's turning his video back on is remind you all to go sign up if you haven't already for the entirety of the leadership series. And you can do that at koniknetwork.com/leadership series. I'm sure Tom will put that in chat. So you can click on that link and get signed up. The reason you would do it is, as I mentioned early on, the content really builds upon itself. So if some of what I'm saying doesn't resonate, or you're like, oh, I'd like to know more about that, going back in time a little bit and watching seminar 1, seminar 2, 3, 4 is going to bring you up to speed faster. And by the way, I sound really intelligent at 1.5 or 1.75 times speed. So feel free to watch me, sped up. Total sidebar on that, Brad, but I was on a flight the other day and I realized I had an hour left in the flight. My computer had died. I pulled up my phone. I was on an American flight. So I'm in their app trying to find a movie to watch. And I found a movie, but it was 2 hours long. And I thought, well, this is perfect. I'll just watch it at 2 times speed and I'll get through the whole movie in an hour. And it happened to be the movie Megan, which is the AI movie about the little robot doll that somebody makes for her niece. And it's supposed to be this thriller, like a horror, suspense movie, but it plays as a comedy when you watch it at 2 times speed. So I was laughing as I was watching it. Somebody's like, what are you watching? I go, this stupid movie Megan that's supposed to be a drama thriller. But anyway, I digress. Sign up. Brad, let's do some Q&A.
All right. Let's see here. All right, we've got one that was posted. Have you found that people are generally willing to do this exercise and share results? What's kind of your experience been in working with companies and individuals?
Yeah, so this is a great question. I'm going to go back a couple of slides here to content. There are some people that are very willing to share the content and some people that are a little more hesitant. They might be just a little bit more private. Quite often in groups, when I do this with larger groups, the challenge is that some people need a lot of time to think through this. And I'm putting them on the spot saying, in 10 or 12 minutes, I want you to write just, free form consciousness writing. What do you want? And so they may be hesitant to put it out there because they're like, I'm not sure this is what I want. So the way that I encourage to facilitate this, if you are interested in doing it as a leader at your company, is do the 10 to 12, 15-minute quick, just drop bullets down if you don't want to write the letter. Share what you feel comfortable sharing in the group, but I encourage you to go home and spend a little bit of time writing, crafting a formal letter to yourself. And then if you're willing in our one-on-one, share that with me. Some people will, some people won't. Even if you say at a high level business related 3 years out, where do you see yourself? What'd you put in the letter? That at least will give you some context about how to lead them well over the next 36 months. So short answer is some will, some won't. So what? Who's next? Right?
Yeah. So that leads me to a question I have. So you mentioned you've done it in group settings, and it sounds like you've done it one-on-one.
Yep.
What do you feel is the best way to do it? Is it to do it in a group setting, or is it better one-on-one?
It depends on how big and how tight knit your team is. So if you're working with a relatively small team, let's say there's 5 to 10 of you, it actually works really well to do it as a group, because as everyone's doing it, there's a little bit of like group tension and pressure to perform, to do it while you're sitting there.
Yeah.
And then assuming there's an even number, it's nice to just split them up evenly and have them share. And candidly, when I do this in groups, quite often they don't know each other. So there's less of a fear or concern about sharing some intimate detail of your life if you know you're never going to see the person again.
Yeah.
But in companies, what I'll often do is say, you get to choose who you want to partner with. So what I've found will happen is they will find someone that they're comfortable with and have, rapport with, and they'll go share their letter with them. So give them the option. They'll go to whomever they're comfortable with and they'll share it.
Okay.
But to date, I've not had one person put their foot in the ground and say, I'm not doing this.
Okay.
Some said, I'm not great at writing letters, or I just did bullet points. I'm not going to share all my bullet points. But it is really fascinating when you get someone who's maybe a little more analytical, right? And we would experience them as cold and slow, going back to the first or second session we did. When you experience someone as cold and slow, a little more analytical, data-driven, but they share something that's really emotional, it's amazing how much deeper the rapport gets. We had someone who's super, super analytical, didn't show any emotion the entire day, and then started tearing up when he was talking about his 3-year letter. And he was one of the ones whose daughter was going to leave the home and go to college. And he was struck with how much he would miss her in being out of the house.
Okay. Wow. All right, we've got another one here. If someone's 3-year letter involves a job change, that's an interesting one. Yeah. Will they share that? What situations have you encountered where someone is looking at leaving the company in the letter?
Yeah, I'm going to speak kind of broadly on this because I have seen instances where someone will, in their letter, write about a job change, but they won't disclose that they're looking for a new job, or 3 years from now, they think they see themselves somewhere else. How it usually manifests in the letter is they'll say, I'm doing something different, I don't know where, or I'm doing something different within the company, I don't know what yet.
Okay.
And that's where, if that's in the letter, I'm doing something different, that's where as a leader, we really need to, like, our ears need to perk up and sit down with that person and say, hey, let's do some career pathing. Where do you want to go? How can I support this? What kind of added or additional experience do you want to have? What kind of certifications do you want to get? What courses or conferences do you want to attend? Because again, if we're talking about millennials, one of the things that they're notorious for, and I apologize for millennials that may be on the call, that I don't mean to offend in saying this, but there is a tendency for both them and for Gen Z coming in to believe that they deserve a seat at the leadership or executive table, far faster than what might be the norm. And so if they're not getting that, or there's no career path to get there, somebody's in their way, there's been a bunch of people that have, the longevity in the company is really long, and it just doesn't feel like there's anywhere for them to go, then they might say, well, I see myself in this role, I just don't know if it's here because that seat won't vacate, right? And again, as leaders, our goal is to help them. And I always say, whenever I'm working with people in my company or elsewhere, my goal is to help you out or help you out. So if I can help you out in terms of promote you to the position you want, great, I'm going to do that. But if I need to help you out the door because we just don't have the opportunity here, I'm going to do that as well. And I'm going to wish you the best of luck, and no harm, no foul, doesn't make you a bad person or us on negative terms. In fact, what I want more than anything, and hopefully all of you do, is that no matter where your people go, they fondly talk about you as their leader because of how much support they got from you.
Sure. Yep. And I think, tied in there, I guess, would be, another question is, as you sit down, you have the individuals on your team do this 3-year letter, they share it to a certain extent, to the extent that they're comfortable with. But I mean, somehow you've got to, as a leader, you're going to need some kind of exposure to their 3-year letter. So then how do you go about coaching to that? I mean, what's sort of the ultimate goal of having someone put this 3-year letter together?
The ultimate goal, it really is twofold. For them, it's clarity and direction, right? It's purposeful direction. Going back to the Think and Grow Rich commentary, it's about definiteness of purpose. So, Brad, in your letter, you told me you wanted to accomplish X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to either hold you accountable to that if you want, or at least remind you of that when it comes time to say, hey, go back and revisit your North Star document. Does this support that or does it refute that? So that's for them. For you as a leader, one of the things that we want to do is, it's certainly about building respect and rapport. The idea that I really care about you. I want to have your whole heart in the game here at work. And to do that, you need to know I fully support what it is you want. The ultra marathoning, the bodybuilding competition, whatever it is you're doing outside of work, your art, your photography passion, whatever it is, I'm going to support that. But as a leader, being able to call some of those things back and saying to your team, hey, on the personal side, how are your parents doing? I know you said that in your 3-year letter that, it might mean that they're moving closer to you. Is that any closer to happening? Or it might mean just asking a question about, well, how are your kids doing about getting into the schools that they truly wanted? You mentioned that in your 3-year letter. And what it implies is that I care about you. I care about what's going on outside of work. And one of the number one factors of happiness among millennials and Gen Z was work-life balance. So as a leader, if I'm communicating your work-life balance to you, I naturally am communicating that it's important to me that you have balance in your life.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I know one thing that, would help. We've only done this as a leadership team. And I think one thing I know that would help in doing this with our team is, I think what I've tended to do is just focus on the professional side of it.
Yeah.
Where do you want to do? What do you want to make? What are your goals for the next coming year? And they're all based around business. And I think that what this does is it really helps to flush out some of the personal goals that are there. Then again, they don't need, some of them are too personal. They may not want to share, but,
right.
Spending more time with my kids, traveling more, whatever it may be. So much of what you're able to do personally is directly affected and even dictated by what you're able to accomplish professionally. And so I love that this exercise sort of blends the two and allows you to get that input from the employees and start to look at, okay, that's great. Like, you want to spend more time with your kids. This is, you want to travel more. Then what can we do over here? What do we need to accomplish over here on the professional side that's going to allow you to do that? I think it's a very powerful exercise. So
no doubt. And I would add to that, Brad, that let's say that you have someone that's entertaining an offer somewhere else. And they've said in their 3-year letter that one of the things that's important to them is spending time with their family and taking an epic vacation once a year. And, you help point that out to them, that this new gig that you're looking at. And I would say to anyone in that situation, we really hate to lose you. If this is a great opportunity, then I wish you the best of luck.
Yeah.
But I also want to coach you on a couple of things if you're open to it. You mentioned in a 3-year letter last year that traveling and taking an epic trip once a year was important. Are you going to be afforded that luxury in this job that's going to have you travel all the time and only get 2 weeks of time off instead of 3, and so on and so forth? There's a way to help hold them to what their North Star is, because they've told you what it is. They've written the letter. So it just becomes a great coaching tool. And one last comment I'll make on that, Brad, is that going back to the comment about the someday goals that people have.
Sure.
If my team knows that I'm in full support of them achieving what they want to achieve in their life, and I'm often saying to them, it's not someday, let's put a date on this. When are we going to do it? Right? SMART goals are specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, time bound. The time bound and realistic come into play here. And so I'm challenging my team all the time. Well, when is that? When would you like to do that? And what are you doing to get closer to that? And I think what a lot of them may not know they appreciate, but appreciate is the accountability.
Yeah. And I think the other thing too is that when you get some inside information on kind of what their personal goals are, and they may, some of the personal goals may come at the expense of some of their productivity, their output at work, in the sense of, if someone says, within 3 years, I want to be working part-time, I want to be working 20 hours a week, and they're your number one salesperson, and you're going, wow, like that, well, one, you can plan for it, but two, to have them see that you're going to actually support the goal and set that as okay, what do we need to accomplish to put you into that position? I think creates that longevity and creates that loyalty around, wow, this company, this leader does care about where I want to go and how I want to get there. So I think it's great.
No question. The common award that people are looking for, at least some of the clients I'm working with now, is best places to work. They want to achieve the best place to work, by the local newspaper,
Yep.
or whoever does it.
Minneapolis Business, St. Paul Business Journals puts it out. Yep.
And if you go look at those and, you read the questionnaires, the survey responses, people aren't going to say, we have a kick butt cappuccino machine. That's why, this is the greatest place to work. They got a stocked fridge every day. What the common answer is, because my manager cares, or they really care about us as individuals. And what better way to show someone you care than to say, hey, where do you see yourself 3 years out, personally, professionally, and how can I help you get there?
Yep. Very powerful. Well, good. We've gotten caught up on the Q&A. I don't see any other questions popping up. So I think we can kind of wrap up. I'll say a few words and I'll pass it over to you to close it out. Would love to have you all back again next month. We have July, and then we are skipping August, and we have the final one in September. And I'll also mention again, if you have any openings in the technical areas, please reach out to us. We would love to help you. And again, just for fun, we've thrown in a Konik camp chair if you open up a qualified order, and then you'll get thrown into a drawing as well for a $500 Dick's Sporting Goods gift card. So if there's something we can do to help, please reach out. Again, thank you all for attending. And Adam, I'll let you wrap it up.
Yeah, thank you, Brad. Thanks to all of you for joining us today. And hopefully this is super valuable to you. I want to reiterate one point, and that is that, as simplistic as this seems, don't underestimate how profound it can be for your team. And so, to Brad's question about, how do you coach to this? Is it one-on-one? And what do we do now that we have the letter? Next month's session in July, we are going to go through what we call the action plan for success. And it literally takes this example, and then we show people exactly how to use it. So I encourage you to write your letter, have your team write their letters, but come back in July, and I'll show you exactly what we do step by step once the letters are written to coach someone to what they say they want to achieve. So a little bit of a tease for what next month is going to bring. And if you happen to be on vacation in July, make sure you get signed up at the link at the bottom of chat there that Tom posted, so that you do have access to all the recordings and all the material, because we do send those out after the fact. So we'll get the recording on this done. I'll get the slides put into PDF format. I'll get those to Tom, and he'll get those sent out to everyone here. So thank you all for being here. I greatly appreciate you. Have a great end to June and a great 4th of July holiday. And we'll see you at session 6. Thanks, Brad.
Sounds good. Thanks, everyone.